Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a pretty significant piece of legislation from Puerto Rico.
That's right. Senate Bill 1, the law on the fundamental right to religious freedom, introduced right at the start of 2025.
And the core idea seems to be establishing religious freedom as, well, fundamental across various sectors.
Exactly. It's based on both the U.S. Constitution and Puerto Rico's own constitution.
We've got the actual bill text here, including the statement of motives, so we're going right to the source.
hmm
Our mission today is to really unpack the key parts of this law. What does it actually say, and what could its impact be? Especially thinking about areas like schools, healthcare.
Even prisons, yeah. It's quite broad.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation. You mentioned the constitutions.
Right. It explicitly calls out the First Amendment, U.S. Constitution, and Article 2, Section 3 of the Puerto Rico Constitution. Both guarantee religious freedom.
And there's this concept mentioned about staying plugged in to federal interpretations.
Yes, that's a nod to Judge Trias Monge. The idea is that Puerto Rico's interpretation shouldn't drift far from federal precedent and jurisprudence on religious freedom.
Interesting. The bill cites some specific Supreme Court cases too, right? Like Widmar and Trinity Lutheran.
It does. Those cases are used to argue that the separation of church and state isn't absolute, that free exercise and free speech rights can limit how strictly that separation is applied.
Okay, so it's just a balancing act.
Sort of, yeah. And it also brings up Kennedy v. Bremerton School District.
Ah, the case that moved away from the Lemon test. What was the significance of dropping that test?
Well, the Lemon Test was, for a long time, the standard for judging if a law violated the Establishment Clause. Moving away from it suggests a shift towards maybe a more accommodating stance on religion in public life, focusing more on historical practices.
Got it. Now, how does this law define the exercise of religious freedom itself? It seems quite broad.
It is broad. It covers acting, or importantly, refusing to act, based on a sincere religious belief.
Even if it's not central to the religion or required.
Exactly. Sincerity is key.
Yeah.
And it protects individual belief, doesn't need to be logical or consistent with others, or part of an organized group.
And it specifically mentions freedom of expression, saying limitations can't be based on the content.
Right. If a restriction is based on the content of religious expression, it triggers strict scrutiny, a very high legal standard.
Okay, let's see how this plays out. What about healthcare and elder care facilities?
Big implications there. The law mandates that facilities must allow clergy visits if a patient or their representative requests it.
Even during emergencies.
Yes, even then. It cites federal laws like RFRA and Arlo UIPA as background, emphasizing access to spiritual care. Mentions HHS interventions during COVID as context, too.
Makes sense. Now, education seems to have a lot of specific points.
It really does. Students get rights to express religious views in assignments, wear religious clothing. Basically, similar rights to secular expression.
And practicing religion, before, during, after school.
Yes. Individually or in groups, during non-instructional time. Religious student groups also get equal access to school facilities.
What about teachers and staff?
Their religious freedom is protected too, but specifically during their non-working hours.
Okay, and then there's the amendment to the immunization law, Law 25. That seems like a major change.
It's significant. It says religious exemptions can't just be nullified without informed parental consent.
And no fines or jail time for parents choosing exemption based on religious freedom.
Correct, though during an epidemic, unvaccinated students can be excluded from school.
But they still need to get their schoolwork.
Yes, materials have to be provided, with accommodations for distance learning or functional diversity if needed.
And there's a new article, 5A, about vaccine information.
Right, mandating that parents get comprehensive data composition, benefits, potential adverse effects, short, medium, and long term, for informed consent.
Wow. Okay, shifting gears slightly, zoning and land use.
Similar principle. Government can't impose zoning rules that substantially burden religious freedom unless there's a compelling state interest, and it's the least restrictive way to achieve it.
And correctional facilities.
Protects inmates' religious freedom, too. Requires reasonable accommodations and access to clergy, consistent with security needs, of course.
So with all these protections, how is the law actually enforced? What if someone's rights are violated?
The burden is on the government. If they substantially burden religious freedom, they have to prove the compelling interest and least restrictive means.
And individuals can take action.
Yes, individuals and religious organizations can sue. They might get damages, injunctions, accommodations, even legal fees.
And the government itself can step in.
The Department of Health or Family can investigate, impose fines up to $5,000 per violation, and potentially revoke licenses for ongoing issues.
And this law actually repeals a previous one.
Yes, it explicitly repeals Law 95/2024, which was specifically about student religious freedom. This new law is much broader. It also states it prevails over conflicting laws,
So it's designed to be the primary law on this.
primarily for citizens versus the government, yes. Private disputes over religious freedom would still fall under the Civil Code, but likely interpreted using this law's parameters.
It includes a separability clause too, right? Standard practice.
Pretty standard. Means if one part is struck down by a court, the legislature intends for the rest to remain in effect if possible.
Okay, so summing up, this seems like a really concerted effort to define and strengthen religious freedom protections in Puerto Rico across many areas of life.
Definitely. It leans heavily on federal precedent and seems to push for a view where religious freedom and separation of church and state are seen as complementary rather than purely opposing forces.
So a final thought for our listeners then, considering just how wide-ranging this law is, how might its actual implementation change things on the ground in Puerto Rico? You know, the relationship between people, religious groups, and the government.
That's the key question, isn't it?
Yeah, what areas might see the most immediate impact or perhaps the first legal challenges? Definitely something to watch. Thanks for walking us through this.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.